Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as we plant some pepper and eggplant seeds. So let's go. Today is February 15th, and my last frost date, based on my zip code, is sometime during the middle of May. So I am about 3 months or approximately 12 weeks away from my last frost. So based on that, I can start a few other types of seeds at this time. And the ones that we're going to start together are some hot as well as sweet peppers, as well as some eggplants. I love hot peppers, and my daughter loves the sweet bell peppers. So I love to grow those, and my experience has been because our growing season is so short, I really need to start those types of plants well before my last frost date. And I like to start them indoors. They're definitely not a plant that you want to be starting outdoors because it takes so long for them to germinate and grow to a good size. And I'd prefer to start them on a heat mat because they take a long time to germinate. So the quicker I can get those seeds up and going, the better off. I normally wouldn't say that for a lot of other types of plants, but definitely when it comes to plants like peppers, you want to get them on a heat mat or put them on top of your refrigerator or somewhere else where some bottom heat is coming up naturally or through a heat mat. However, this is my first year using a heat mat. In the past, I didn't have a heat mat, and the seeds germinated. It might have taken them longer, and I was okay with that, but I'd prefer to have them germinate faster so that I can just get them going and hopefully get a harvest earlier than when I've gotten the harvest in the past. So when it comes to the variety of seeds we're going to start today, we're going to start with the eggplant. That's jewel amethyst, and this is by Botanical Interests. And what I like about it is that it's a small size plant, which will be perfect for containers or pots. And I also have a hot pepper. It's a habanero, which is one of my favorites. I love to put it on my pizza, and my friend Shelly loves them as well. And the company is Ferry Morse. I have Baker Creek's orange bell pepper, and I grew this last year and it was delicious. My daughter loves bell peppers, so this will be nice to have. I have Burpee's sweet pepper. It's a California Wonder. That's a common one that you often see out there if you're buying the sweet bell peppers. I have another Baker Creek. It's the Purple Beauty sweet bell pepper. We have Ferry Morse, and it's a jalapeno, and it's called a hot mild jalapeno. I'm not really sure why it's a hot mild, but it is. And then 2 years ago, so 2022, I collected my own seeds from one of my habanero plants. And I have no idea if these seeds will germinate or not, but we're going to plant them and we're going to see. And I'll make sure I label it specifically that they were seeds that were harvested, and then we'll know. This year, one of my own personal goals is to collect my own seeds from my vegetable plants. For many years, I've been collecting my seeds from different flowers, be it annual or perennial flowers. I really don't have a lot of experience collecting my own seeds from vegetable plants, but I know it can be done. I've typically collected my seeds from like basil, cilantro, plants that are a little bit easier to see the seeds. And I think a few years ago, even I was successfully collected the seeds off of my peas and my green beans. And again, some of those are pretty easy. If you just leave the fruit or the vegetable on the plant and you basically let the pod dry out, then you will eventually be able to collect the seeds that way. So that's one of my big goals for this year, and I'll definitely share my progress on how I do with that, just in case you're interested in collecting your own seeds from vegetables as well. So I've made a number of videos lately on starting seeds indoors, and I just thought it would be good to just kind of do a quick video to show you what I'm working on today. And the process is the same. I like to use these restaurant to-go containers because they're cheap, they're easy, and I have drainage holes poked in on the bottom of them, which makes it easier for bottom watering. That's very important when you're starting seeds indoors. You definitely want to water from the bottom. It's just healthier for the plant. And then also, I like to use a seed starting mix, and it's a seed starting mix that I've made myself using a mixture of peat moss as well as vermiculite. However, you can use seed starting mix that you've bought. You can also use potting mix. The key with the potting mix is just make sure it's not too heavy, and whatever mix you use, you want to make sure there's not a lot of big chunks of like wood or mulch in there. you want to make sure you've sifted out your mix so that it's nice and fine. It just makes it easier for the seeds to germinate and pop out through the soil without having big pieces of wood in there that they're competing with. And in this pot over here is my seed starting mix that I already made a little while ago, and it's already been pre-moistened. And I put boiling hot water in here just to kill off the possibility of any fungus gnat eggs that might have been in there. And I like to put about 1 inch of soil in here so that there's enough room for the roots to grow down, down towards the bottom, but also for the plant. And what my goal is I like to plant a bunch of seeds in one container like this. And then I will pick the seeds out and pot them up into 6-packs. Now, you don't have to do it this way. You can definitely just plant them directly into bigger containers, into a 6-pack or into a 3-inch pot, whatever your preference is. Some people don't like to pot things up, and that's totally fine. And also, it is important to keep in mind the amount of space you have under, let's say you have indoor grow lights. You don't want to have too many plants going at once that are all in, let's say, 3-inch pots, because you're going to run out of room fast. So that's something you want to keep in mind. But for me, I'm happy just planting a bunch of seeds in here. A lot of times my seeds are not fresh. They might be 1, 2, 3 years old. So it makes sense for me for a number of reasons to plant a bunch of seeds in here, see what sprouts, and then once they have 1 to 2 true leaves on there, I can prick them out and pot them up. So the first seed we're going to plant is the hot, mild jalapeno. And I'm looking at how many seeds are in here. The other thing actually I want to share is the date on the back here, just so you know how old the seeds are. And it says packed for December 2023. So they're not that old, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just plant all of these. I've mentioned in previous videos that I have a backyard plant nursery. So whatever plants I'm not going to use, I can also give to family and friends, but I can also sell as part of my backyard plant nursery. Jalapeno is definitely a plant that I want to collect the seeds from. And going forward, when I'm collecting my own seeds, I won't feel so bad if seeds are old and they're less viable because I collected them myself. But when I buy them, I feel bad if the seeds, have gotten very old and are no longer viable. So I would rather just use up all these seeds this year and then I'll collect my own in the fall. When it comes to the depth of your seed, you always want to look at the back of your seed packet. And it says here to plant the seeds 1/4 inch deep. So I'm just barely going to be covering the seeds. It also mentions on here that it takes about 10 to 12 days to germinate. And that just means how many days it takes for the seed to pop up through the soil. And with me putting this on a heat mat, it might even be a little bit quicker. And when it says days to harvest, that's 72 to 75 days. Now, keep in mind, that's not from starting with the day that I planted these seeds. It's starting with the day that I actually bring them outside and plant them outside in the ground or in a pot. So that's very important whenever you see days to harvest. You want to keep that in mind. And even though the seed packet says start seeds indoors 8 weeks before planting outdoors, I am giving myself 12 weeks and I want a nice plant, a nice big plant that I can plant outside. And even though I'm doing that with this particular plant, generally speaking, you don't want to start your plants too early. Because if you do that, sometimes if you bring out a very big plant outside, like let's say a big tomato plant, and you go to plant it outside, there's a chance the plant will not thrive. And so you want to keep that in mind. There is a right or wrong when it comes to, when to start your seeds. But something that takes a long time, like a pepper plant, I feel fine starting that earlier. And again, especially because where I live, my growing season is so short. I want to make sure that I can actually enjoy some peppers before my first frost, which is typically sometime in September. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're just going to add the lightest layer of the seed starting mix on top of these seeds. And this seed starting mix has been pre-moistened. And what I'm still going to do, even though it's been pre-moistened, is we're just going to add a little bit more water on top here. But before we add the water, I'm just pressing down. I want to make sure that there's good contact between the seeds and the soil. And you can see I have a big, huge water pump sprayer that I use. I've seen a lot of people use something much smaller, and you can use whatever works for you. This works for me. And then you want to cover this with some sort of a humidity dome, something that's clear, that's going to let some light in, but it's also going to keep the moisture in and just make it a little bit of a humid environment, which is perfect for the seeds to germinate in. I like to use plastic wrap, and I reuse my plastic wrap every time I start some new seeds, so which makes it, even better to use. I'm not just using it once and throwing it away. And then I just want to write down the name of the seed that we planted in here and the date that we planted them. The next thing that I wanted to mention was this tray over here is a tray that I already had sown seeds in here. They were the pansy mix, and it looks like I started these on January 22nd, and I did that on one side in the tray. And then on the other side, on that same date, I planted celestial blue pansies. And so I'm going to reuse this clear plastic wrap. I'm also going to reuse the seed starting mix that was in there from before. And I'll just add a small little layer on top of it just because. But that's what's nice about it, is that I've already graduated the plants that were in here. And now I can reuse, as long as the seed starting mix doesn't look like it has any issues, it didn't have any fungal issues, I can reuse that. And next, what we're going to plant is the eggplant. And it just looks so cute. I love like how tiny the plant is and how small the eggplants on here are. And what it says here is that it's petite and purple. It's an absolute gem. But what I wanted to share was on the back. It says it can take between 10 to 20 days to emerge. You want to plant the seeds 1/4 inch deep. And it says for where to start, you definitely want to start them indoors. And then for maturity, it says 80 days from transplanting. Again, 80 days from maturity is not 80 days from the day that I planted the seeds in here. 80 days is also not the day that I pricked the seedlings out of here and put them into 6-packs. It's when I actually transplant the plant outside. Then the clock begins, and the plant should produce eggplants about 80 days after that. And another thing that's important here is it says when to sow outside. 2 to 4 weeks after my average last frost date, when the soil temperature is at least 70 degrees Fahrenheit, ideally 80 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and when the outside air temperature is above 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So my last average frost date is around May 15th. So according to this, I really should not be planting the small transplants that we're going to grow together inside. I should not be even bringing those outside until about the end of May, if not the beginning to middle of June. So you can imagine that's not a lot of time for me to hope that I get eggplants this season, but that's why I'm starting these super early indoors. So I have a nice big plant to start with, and as soon as those temperatures are in that ideal range, then I will move the plants outside. And when it says when to start inside, it's recommended 10 to 12 weeks before my average last frost date. Average last frost date is middle of May. So if you backtrack 12 weeks, well, here we are, middle of February. So it's a perfect time to be planting these seeds. And what I like about the botanical interest seeds is that not only is there a lot of great information on the back side and the front side of the seed packet, but actually when you open up the seed packet and look inside, there's even more additional information in there. They really pack a lot of great information just within the seed packet. So I bought these seeds this year. Have any of you ever collected your own seeds from your own vegetables? And if so, which ones? Which ones did you have luck with? If you could drop a comment below, that would be great. I'd love to know. So it looks like there are about 12 seeds in here. So I'm just going to plant all of them, and I'm only going to do them on one half of this tray. And on the other half of the tray, I think we're going to plant the habanero seeds that I collected. And now oftentimes, you'll hear to only put plants within a tray that are all going to germinate at the same time. And part of that is true. However, I will be checking these plants often. And as soon as they have at least their first real or true set of leaves, I will then be transplanting them out and putting them up into a bigger container. So I'm not too worried about the fact that the eggplants are going to share this container with the habanero peppers. So that's that. And then we have the habanero peppers. And it looks like in this packet, I must have collected at least probably 30 seeds here. and I collected them in 2022, so they're a little bit old. I could use a wet paper towel and try to germinate them that way to do a germination test to see how viable all these seeds are, but I'm not too worried about it. I'm just going to plant them all in this container and then I'll find out how many come up. I could put a divider in the center here, but I can tell the difference with what a pepper plant looks like versus what an eggplant looks like. And a lot of times when it comes to how deep to plant the seeds, typically you want to plant the seeds about 1 to 2 times deeper than the size of the seed. And these seeds aren't terribly big. And the eggplants had said to plant them about 1/4 inch deep. I believe the same will be for the peppers. So I'm not too worried about it. I'm just going to put a light layer of the seed starting mix on top of here. So I like to plant a lot of my peppers and eggplants in container pots. And the biggest reason is where I do have raised beds, they're not in an area where I get a ton of sun. In my backyard, I have some raised bed there. That was like my initial first vegetable garden that I created when I, bought this house, and we made a vegetable garden there. It gets some sun, but it's definitely not full sun. It's not optimal for plants like these. And then last year, we put in some raised beds on the south side of my house. And that area definitely gets more sun. And last year, I packed it with strawberries and blueberries. I also planted flowers out there. This year, I first of all, I'm going to be moving those beds. They're not in the great position where I want them. But also, if I can get them moved in time, I would like to possibly put some of these plants in some of those raised beds. But at a minimum, these plants will be going in pots and containers, and those will get placed in areas where I do get full sun. That's the key. You definitely want to make sure with most vegetables that you're getting that full sun and that you're also giving them the fertilizer they need, the water that they need. That's the biggest thing you can do to make happy plants that produce great vegetables for you. So if you're in the same boat as me and you're going to be growing in pots, definitely follow along and I'll show you some of my tips and tricks to having an abundant amount of vegetables in some of these containers and pots. So again, these will all get placed on a heat mat, and as soon as I see them germinating a fair amount within a tray, then this clear plastic wrap can come off. And once the plants get their first true leaves, I will start potting them up. Other than the heat mat, these plants will also get placed under LED grow lights that I have set up. They're on a timer. The timer comes on at 5 a.m. and it goes off at 9 p.m. I also have a fan running in this space, and that runs about 2 or 3 hours each day. And it's just to add a little bit of movement in the room. It's healthier for the plants. It's good for them to sway and move around. It's getting them stronger to get used to like the outdoor conditions, like the strong winds. And it also dries off the top of the soil so that the plants aren't always so wet. And the biggest thing I've learned when it comes to starting plants from seed is, don't overlove them. Don't give them too much water. You want to water them from below. That's important. But you also want to make sure you're picking up your trays and checking them. And if they're too wet, don't water them. Just let them dry out a little bit. And there are times, sometimes like even within a 6-pack, that one small cell definitely seems very dry and the other 5 cells look wet. And in a situation like that, I've been fine with just adding a tiny bit of water, even if it's on the top of the soil in that case, just to put it in that one cell. I don't want to oversaturate the whole entire 6-pack. So generally you want to bottom water, but if it does happen that you have a 6-pack and one cell seems very dry, but the rest are fine, then it's okay to just give that one cell a tiny bit of water. And in many of these videos that I'm making, I'm always going to be just sharing different tips as I think about them. And hopefully they will help you out as well. Now, I will not be fertilizing these peppers or these eggplant plants until they have at least 2 sets of true leaves on them. You don't want to give too much fertilizer. The seed has what it needs to initially grow. So hold off on the fertilizer until it has at least a couple of sets of the true leaves, meaning the leaves that look like what the plant's going to look like. That first set of leaves are not the true leaves. Those are called the cotyledons. So just keep that in mind. So I'm just going to keep on going here. There's no use in showing you, me planting the rest of these seeds. Just know that today's the day for me to do all my peppers and also the eggplant. And then coming up soon, I will be doing a lot of flowers. I'm already kind of behind. So I am going to be doing some impatiens, and I have delphiniums in my fridge. Actually, I have some delphinium seeds and lavender seeds that have been in the fridge. So I'm going to be doing those and a bunch of other flowers. So you don't want to miss those. I hope you're able to start some of your seeds as well. And if not, I'm sure you'll be starting them soon. If you have any questions, please ask below. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.